Welcome back to my channel. So excited to have you. Today we have some very special guests and I'm really excited to bring them to you. So let's get right into it. Thankfully, there have been countless documentaries about what it is like on the inside of the Jehovah's Witness organization. They have helped us feel like we're not alone, and they have helped us move forward in our journey of navigating our way out of that religion. And I want to introduce you guys to James Zimmerman and Scott Holman, both XJWs who created this beautiful documentary along with other survivors. If you're new here, if you're scared, if you're worried, if you're newly waking up, we just want you to know that you're going to be okay.
Hi, I'm Rhett Sutter, and I'm doing a demonstration tape on the modern audio equipment that our studio has, just in case you want to come and record in our modern studio.
Nuclear Gopher was a record label and online community of Jehovah's Witnesses who all did indie music. It just blew up, but it all stayed in these weird little bounds.
Witnesses can listen to music. It's not like a Footloose situation where like the preacher's like, no music ever. But stuff is frowned upon.
You need to really beware of that disco beat because that disco beat invites the demons. This is not inviting the demons. It's Lionel Richie.
They think that any moment now, God is going to destroy the world.
At 17, I basically thought to myself, what am I doing? Is this how I want to live my life? Like, do I even believe this?
If they just treated people all right and had some kooky beliefs, I could totally live with it. But friends who committed suicide because they're gay and they're a witness, everything just changed.
Music was my savior at that point.
The moment people started taking it seriously is the moment that someone would start to, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
We started talking, and she's like, well, so if we split up, would you still be a witness? What I actually said was, no, I don't believe any of it anymore. And I never saw her again.
Your wife?
Yeah, I never physically saw her again.
It was an open, hidden fist fight before I saw God's.
Nuclear Gopher was very special. It created a space for people to be eccentric and creative and also as healthy as you could be in that culture. And while it lasted, it was like the best.
James, let's start with you. Let's go back a little bit. Why don't you take us a little bit into your backstory and ultimately how you landed in creating this documentary and your participation in it?
Oh, that's a huge question that I could take the rest of your show. But I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, as were both of my parents. Their parents became witnesses when they were very young. So I had all my uncles, aunts, cousins, and grandparents and parents, and my sibling. We were all Jehovah's Witnesses. So that was kind of nice because a lot of people like kind of had to keep their relatives at arm's length if they were a Jehovah's Witness. You know, like the rest of the family would celebrate a holiday or something, you know, or they would get together for someone's birthday and the witness part of the family couldn't do it. Well, we didn't have any of that. So that was nice. Grew up in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And I was really devout. I was interviewed on the witnesses' conventions and assemblies very often.
One of such families is the Zimmerman family, and we'd like to talk with them for a few moments. Young James Zimmerman also, at the age of 16, your son became a regular pioneer, and at the age of 17, while still 17, he became a ministerial servant. So let's speak with him for a moment. Young brother James, how do you feel about your parents' conscientious efforts to instill in you a love for Jehovah and his standards?
Well, I really appreciate being able to be taught by Jehovah through such a faithful family of parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts, because their fine example makes it easier for me to serve Jehovah, and also it gives me a greater incentive to set meaningful spiritual goals for myself. So I'm really proud to belong to such a spiritual family.
Thank you for being taught by Jehovah.
I was a ministerial servant. I started regular pioneering, which meant knocking on doors for 1,000 hours a month, 1,000 hours a year. Started doing that when I was still a junior in high school. I did that for several years. I also did temporary work at the Watchtower's world headquarters, which at the time was in Brooklyn, New York. Now it's in upstate. But so I got to do temporary work there for a while, about 3 weeks or so, enough to give me a taste to know that I didn't want to go back and do it permanently like some of my friends did. Uh, then also, while I was a young adult, I got married to a Jehovah's Witness. She had been raised as a Jehovah's Witness as well since birth. And we pioneered together for the first year that we were married, and then realized that we weren't enjoying it. We weren't having any fun. We just couldn't do it. We couldn't pay our very meager bills, which was just like for a 1-bedroom apartment and electric, like we still couldn't pay those tiny bills and also pioneer. So it was very difficult because that's what I had hoped to do. Once I decided I wasn't going to go work at the world headquarters anymore, I thought, well, I'm going to find me a wife and we're just going to do the full-time door-to-door work forever until Armageddon comes. So when that didn't work out, I was kind of devastated and started just thinking, well, maybe I'll just be a really good witness, who knows a lot about it. So I started researching it. And if you research any religion, you eventually realize it's not true. It might be interesting, but it's not true. So soon after our first child was born, my wife, she's my ex-wife now, but she was my wife at the time, and she just realized she couldn't do it. We had been kind of living a lie, and that's okay if you're two adults and want to do it. But if you are raising your child, how do you send him to school and then come home and say, yeah, what you learned there, that was true, but we want you to pretend that it's not true? Or when the kids in the neighborhood invite you to a birthday party, how do we say, yeah, we think it's fine, but we're not going to do it because we're scared of losing all of our friends and family. So she actually taught, even though I was the one who had put a lot of doubts in her mind because of the research I was doing, she's the one who talked me into leaving the religion. And then the downside to being in such an insulated organization like that is that that's where all your friends and relatives are. So then when we left, we had no one. But we did sort of have a couple people because they were other people who had left before us. So we reconnected with them. And in time, that also meant Scott here. And he contacted me when it was time for him to get creative on our witness experience. So he asked if I and a few of my friends would be interested in being interviewed for his documentary. And I think that brings us to right now. Sorry if that was too long-winded.
Not at all. No,
Okay.
I can just sit here and listen to these stories. It's interesting because when you wake up, you think, I'm the only one who's going through this or feels this way. And then the more you talk about it, you're kind of reaffirming to yourself, oh, you know what, there's more of me out there. And so, yeah, that does bring us to you, Scott. So tell us what brought you here. And I'm interested to know the relationship as well.
So James is a lifelong friend of Ryan Sutter, who's interviewed in the film as well. And I was talking to Ryan initially about this project. Actually, I knew the other people in the film as well before I met Ryan. Anyway, I got in touch with Ryan, and he's like, well, if you want to interview another person or get access to more videos and films, there's this guy, James, who is a filmmaker. And we made a lot of films together back in the day with the Jehovah's Witness art community. And so I reached out to James, and then we were doing the crowdfund at that point. So James had made all these music videos and content, and he'd also written a book. So Ryan's like, you need to reach out to this guy because he's an author of the book on the topic of leaving the faith. And he has all these films that are in the archive that are related to the project, like this creative community. So get in touch with him and see how he feels. And then James generously offered we put his book as an option in the crowdfund that you could buy it. And then I would get some proceeds from it or something like that. I think, we sold some books that went to the project, went to the crowdfund. And then we got to know each other. And he gave me him and his ex-wife, they gave me a vault. There's a creative vault from all the different artists in this project. And he gave me access to something like 25 films that he and his wife had made with Ryan Sutter. Different groups of people made different content. And that's what you see in basically the first half of the film heavily shows James's films. And that's what part of all those artists donating their art to this project and collaborating in that way with their archive of art was what really makes it a documentary. Because I can just interview people like you're interviewing people, but this podcast isn't a documentary. And I could have 20 different interviews and mix them all together, and that's still not a documentary. It's just talking head. But having the art to go with it and show something about the past, actually show it and go into the past, is what really made it happen.
Wow. So you guys meet up, you decide to collaborate with all of these other artists who were also XJWs as well.
That's right. There's 5 people interviewed, and they're all ex-witnesses. And the special thing about this film, that I haven't seen in other XJW's Witness films is everyone knew each other. They all had a relationship in the religion, and they also have a different relationship outside of the religion, or a friend with an interesting past.
Wow. Yeah. And I remember growing up in the 90s in the religion, and there were so many musicians that were just, it's almost like they had this amazing potential and they were just on the cusp of something beautiful and something grand. My brother is an amazing musician to this day, and he was held back so much, and he was a wonderful songwriter. And that was one of the reasons why I connected to the documentary too, is having an artistic background and being so involved in music. But at the same time, you're kind of clamped at the heart when you're in that religion. So after you left, I'm gonna direct this to you, James. After you left and you were making this documentary, what did that look like for you to get everybody together? Were they already out? Was everybody ready to do it? Is that how it happened?
Yeah, all of the people who were in the documentary, they had already left the religion at least a few years, maybe a decade before Scott began putting the film together. But I definitely see what you're talking about creativity being not stamped out, but really curtailed. And you really have to watch, like, let's say you just want to write a poem about how angry you're feeling today. Well, if you let other witnesses see that, they're gonna be like, why are you angry? Jehovah's people are happy people. And, oh, I wouldn't use that word. And, oh, I wouldn't say that you feel this way. And no, you don't have no hope. You do have hope because of this. And so you kind of have to watch what sort, certainly your language, certainly the topic, but even the way you discuss your emotions. And I'm not a musician, but I loved filming their concerts and making music videos for them. So that's why I'm glad that Scott included me as well, because the community that Ryan Sutter created wasn't just about people who wanted to get together and play guitar. It was a really good place for having a creative outlet without the criticism. And you were accepted and could be your authentic self, whether you were a guitar aficionado or a poet, or more like me, a filmmaker and a writer. So.
So you're a filmmaker, and as a JW, you couldn't actually be a filmmaker. You were a Bethelite and a pioneer and a husband and doing filmmaking.
Yeah, there were some
films going to get you into the new system.
There were some films we created that some people expressed distaste for, so we didn't show them too widely. And some of it now seems so innocent. Like, we did one music video where Ryan's older brother Rhett is being a lounge singer, so he's got his button shirt unbuttoned down to his navel, and he's holding a fake cigarette in his mouth, as a lounge singer might do while they're embracing the microphone, right? That seems so tame, right? But some people said they were offended by that. And what actually, when I was at Bethel, me and another buddy of mine, we made a mock beer commercial for Bethel Light and Bethel Light Dry. And that was considered pretty taboo, but it's really towing the line. So I had to kind of watch who we showed it to.
There's actually a cut of the film where I found that video. I mean, he had given it to me, but when I finally got a chance to go through all the footage, I was like, oh, this has to go in the film. And I actually recut the entire Bethel Light beer commercial.
Oh, really?
While they're playing billiards, and I had this little weird snippet that goes into this bizarro thing that no one would understand that if they're not from inside their religion.
Yeah.
But you might not even get it if you are, because it's a play on words. But anyway, it was kind of funny. And then my answer was that doesn't make any sense.
The tagline was Bethel Light and new Bethel Light Dry. Circuit overseers ask for it by name.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense too.
Yeah, and it was filmed at Bethel in their rec room, where they have a dartboard and pool tables.
It was filmed at Bethel? Oh man.
Oh yeah, right in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah.
The entire plot was people playing pool.
Yeah, you could just hear voices, because there was other people there and everything. So.
New Bethelite and new Bethelite Dry. Circuit overseers ask for it by name.
Bethelite is not recommended for pregnant women during meetings for field service or during morning worship.
Bethelite is 56% alcohol by volume and is therefore listed as a toxic substance by the FDA.
Bottled in a sweatshop in Brooklyn, New York by Catholic children. Do not operate heavy machinery while bombed.
Do not engage Bethelite Dry in a staring contest. You will lose. Coming soon, new Israelite Dry.
I remember, okay, so this is also why it feels kind of personal to me. I was the kid who always walked around with their video camera. And I was single up until my late 20s. And at the time, well, I think it's still the case now, women couldn't go to Bethel unless you were married. And at the time, there was an A.D. department. And my stepfather we would go to Bethel all the time because I grew up in New Jersey, and I would visit the A.D. department, and I got to know Ted Adams, and I was really, really into making films and making movies. And at the time I used my camcorder, and it was just so much fun. And I believe that there's a story in everybody. I still believe in that.
All right, I'm your narrator for the evening. Wendy. No. Okay, get back to you inside. How's he gonna move and cut the cake?
Shoots and misses. Bobby puts the fade away and misses. This is getting boring. We're gonna go for a commercial break. Now a word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Wendy, and I'm driving in my vehicle. I want to look cool, and the only way to do that is to wear snazzy sports shades for a snazzy sports person with a snazzy sports car.
It's interesting because I look at now what they've turned it into. They've turned it into a full-on Hollywood studio. And at the time, doing things like that had nothing to do with the preaching work, had nothing to do with the new system. But now they have this full-on thing where now single sisters are involved. And it's just amazing to me that they wouldn't let me in. They wouldn't let me have any part of it. And so I never continued with video production. So throughout my life, I was doing little things here and there, and maybe that's why I do this, you know? Yeah. So I'm really grateful that you continued with that talent and you brought us this documentary of what we have today. So thank you for that.
It's a pleasure.
Getting into the documentary, what are some of your favorite parts about it?
One thing it's been pointed out to me a number of times is I put a lot of work into cutting this old footage from James and Brian's old films and the music videos from others. And the music was a big part. Probably, two things. Mm-hmm. One is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is completely soundtracked by the artist while they were witnesses, like the music they made as witnesses, and some of the music in the later part of the film that they made after leaving. And that music they made after leaving was about processing their exit from the faith. And usually those albums came out like right within the first couple of years after leaving, like right about where you were at, 1 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And the songs are powerful, but one thing, so I've been in a few bands in my life. I was in a band in high school, and I was in a band that I made a band in the Witnesses. And then after I left the religion, I was in another band. So I have this deep connection to music personally. And I think it was a lot of like what informed my freedom of thought and like through self-expression. And that's like my big angle with the film is that freedom of a lot of healing and freedom of thought comes from self-expression, no matter where you're at in life. But doing the soundtrack was special because it was my opportunity to highlight their music. But beyond that, enhance the storytelling emotionally. So I spent like 2 or 3 months just every day during work, after work, like I was editing this thing. I just was so focused on it, and I put a lot of emotion into it. Like I felt the music, and I feel like no one's ever commented and said that song didn't work there. The comments I've got is, where can I buy the album? Mm-hmm. Where can I get the soundtrack? Where can I listen to this music? Because wow, that was powerful, and they're so impressed. And I mean, that obviously that comes from the musicians making amazing music and being very talented, but it also is probably my biggest piece of creativity that's in the film is like curating that soundtrack and making it flow with the dialogue and the storytelling. And the other thing that came to mind was kind of funny because I started out as a visual artist. Even back in high school, we had like a film program, and I went to school for it later. And I spent like 5 years in Vietnam working on films and music videos and documentary. So I like developed my skills at that point after leaving the faith. And primarily I'm a visual artist, and I learned through this project much, like probably my biggest learning experience is how important storytelling is and story flow. And the comments that I get on the film that really shock people are from moments that have none of my work. Moments that it's just a talking head on the screen. And they're like, oh my God, when Ryan told that story about how his ex-wife was crying and then she said, okay, I need you to leave.
You know, Jehovah hates a divorcing, right? And she's like, well, so if we split up, would you still be a witness? And which I thought was kind of an odd question because I hadn't said anything at all about religion. But when she asked me that question, my internal editor was just gone. If you would have asked me what would I say, I would have been like, oh, of course, you know, we'll take it one step at a time. But what I actually said was, no, I don't believe any of it anymore. She was like crying at the moment that I said that, and as soon as I said it, she stopped crying. And she's like, Oh. Okay, so I'm gonna move back to my parents in Chicago, and I need you to leave right now. And I never saw her again.
Your wife?
Yeah, I never physically saw her again.
And like they never saw each other. Like that moment, spoiler, was like for people, they were just like riveted by storytelling, and they were just like imagining it. Like when you read a book, you imagine the characters, you imagine the scenario, you have a whole world that's created in your mind. And for every person it's different, but it's very real. And that I put so much effort and time into like curating the visuals of the film to like, that's like it was my stronger suit part of the film. And the most important things are storytelling, and then audio quality, and then visual. The visuals are like the least important of the three. But for people to comment regularly that like the part that had no visual, it's just the talking head, were like their most shocking moment and most favorite part of the film. It's kind of funny because it's not my work. It's Ryan.
Yeah.
It's Ryan's really good storytelling.
And what about you, James? What are some of your most noteworthy moments in this documentary? Something that really touched you, something that really kind of pulled your passion out when you were making it?
I like when the filming cuts between parallel stories and you get to hear them from different people's angles. I'm glad that Cindy's story is in there because I think women have a fundamentally different story as a Jehovah's Witness than men do. One reason why I wanted to write my book was because I'd read 4 or 5 books by ex-witnesses and they were all by women, which, yeah, those are great. I'm glad they're out there, and there should be, women obviously need to be heard from more in our society. But I thought my story is different because I had the added stress of, having to be the head of the house and leading car groups and being a ministerial servant, so that's the opposite side of the coin. So I'm glad that there was like that parallel story, like Cindy telling her story versus Eric, or not versus, but in complement too. And then also a few different people talking about Ryan's brother, Rhett, who passed away at an early age, and talking about his final days and the funeral and everything. So I like that juxtaposition that Scott put into the film. And then also what really touched me was also a part that I had nothing to do with, but seeing it later where Scott is filming Ryan, watching footage that Ryan had put together that was shown after Rhett's funeral.
This is like one of my favorite things ever, so that's why I picked you.
And Ryan talked about how no one would talk to him at his own brother's funeral.
When the funeral happened, it was at a big Kingdom Hall, like one of those ones that like opens up into like a double hall for like assemblies kind of thing, and I can't remember where it's located, but Rhett had gone to like 10 different congregations over the years, and everybody loved him. He was just so lovable. And so everybody came to his funeral. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It was the size of a circuit assembly.
How many people are we talking about?
1,200, maybe 15.
Wow.
None of them talked to me. There were people in the parking lot was overflowing with people. Most of these people I had known for decades. Didn't even speak to me.
Then I live with that for the rest of my life. That's just so terrible and so disgusting. And I guess that made me feel bad because Ryan basically came up and forced me to hug him, and I gave him a hug at the funeral, and I talked to him real briefly, but then another friend kind of grabbed my shoulder and pulled me away, like as if to say Ryan is bad news, because at this point Ryan had left the religion, but I had not. So I was nervous to even see him there, and then I didn't know how I would treat him. I thought maybe I'll just ignore him because there's 500 people here, because I can be I am Ryan's friend, and I hope I am for many more decades, but I cannot make up for not having been kinder in that moment when he really needed people. There was 500 other bodies there, but there was probably only 5 that were giving him any solace. And if someone needs solace at a funeral, it's the younger brother of a man who died in his early 30s. Everyone was there providing solace to Rhett's father, and Rhett's siblings who were still witnesses. I probably had more people pat me on the back, which, that was nice. I needed some solace too, but not as much as Ryan. So seeing that video, like, the film within the film, the way Scott put it together, and just seeing Ryan's emotion, like he's smiling because he sees his brother drumming and doing cool music stuff, but it's also very wistful, poignant. I don't know, emotions I can't put to words just watching that and seeing how messed up the religion made things for people.
Oh, it's so destructive. And one of the things that I did actually really appreciate about this is it was more than just talking about traumatic situations. It was, yes, we went through it, but look at us now. So can you speak to how you were able to kind of do that? You were able to tell a horrific story about what they had gone through, and then you kind of parlayed that into that they're doing well now and they're okay. So can you talk about that a little bit and why that was important?
That was a big angle that was important to me before I made anything, because I had seen basically every film that I was aware of on the topic, and a lot of documentaries, a lot of news programs that come out, and they keep on coming out. Like every year or two, there's another one. And they all, for me, have a very similar format. And I'm not proud of the way they tell the story. I'm not like telling my friend, like, oh my God, check out this documentary. This is totally my life. And I wanted to make something that showed off the good things about my past, because most people, you tell them any detail at all, reveal any information. And I was really trying to keep it a secret because it always goes in a very weird place. And I get otherized. There were some really cool things happening. There was a really fun, vibrant scene, and these are humans. I want to humanize the story of people being in the religion. It's not just weird cult stuff all the time. There's like very real relationships, and like the musician friends I had were really important to me, and I still count them as great friends from my past. And then so the format of all the other documentary programs on the topic are, we've got a salacious story for you today. And then they talk about it, they introduce it, and then the person gets to speak for themselves while like getting emotional, because they're talking about a very emotional moment in the interview about their and in their life. And then they're emotional on screen, and that's the vulnerable thing that got people to keep watching. And then they roll credits, and it's like, then you're just supposed to, as an audience, feel sorry and pity for this person without really knowing any context or anything about who they are. They're just this weird emotional person now, and that's what's put on screen. And although this film has some of that, you first get to know what it's like to live in that world for these people, and you get to experience that culture. But also, it was very important to me to have, and it gets better, like landing. Like, there's already enough sadness in those other programs and in general that like people commit suicide in the religion. They commit suicide just thinking about leaving, just thinking about what they'll lose if they leave, or this idea, or like that God doesn't like them anymore, or doesn't find any value in them. Or when they leave, when they get cut off, all the trauma that comes from the religious trauma syndrome, the PTSD, and the abuse, the emotional abuse of shunning, that they then also end their lives. So like, just for people that might go through that, and it's totally understandable when the rug is pulled up from underneath you by this faith group, and that there is a life after, and it's awesome. And it's like, my exit moment was, I wish it had come a lot earlier to fully finally get out, but I stuck with it on my own, for my own ways and in my own lane, for my own reasons. But it's also the moment in my life where like everything got better, everything became more interesting, everything became possible, and I just want other people to like do that.
Thank you so much for your honesty with that. And I definitely think that you've conveyed that in so many ways, especially artistically. One of the things that I really appreciated was, yes, they're telling their stories about these really horrible things, but they're not staying there. And that's basically, for our viewers, that's what this channel is about. That right now, if you're newly waking up and you're watching this, maybe you're going down the rabbit hole of learning about JWs. You're learning about all the atrocities that go on, or maybe you've experienced them yourself, so you know them to be true. And maybe you're terrified. I never want to forget what it was like to be under the covers, terrified that something was going to happen to me because I'm doing research on something that I thought I believed in. I never want to forget what that was like. But at the same time, staying in that place of anger and staying in that place of pain is what they want. they want you to stay small. They want you to stay hidden, and they want you to kind of exactly fit the narrative of people who leave that they talk about all the time. So for you, James, the healing process, even though it was so long for you, this must have been very healing for you to create this documentary and be part of it with your friends. Can you talk a little bit about what healing looked like for you as you participated in this as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a catharsis. I think that word has been used a lot at interviews regarding the film.
Yeah.
It's it was great to hear them in their own words because, for example, I know that Chad is no longer a witness and that he's successfully raising his child and that he's employed, but like I don't know all the details because I don't contact him in day-to-day life that often, right?
Mhm.
It's not like
Mhm.
he's over here at my house right now, you know. So
Mhm.
it was nice to hear in their own words what they were doing and how things work because you're kind of like Scott was saying, your story still goes on, and there's too many documentaries and biopics where either the person dies at the end and that's just the end. Maybe the screen goes to black and there's just a few lines of text, but that like just leaves. I'm so glad that Scott has the last 15-20 minutes of the documentary. That's the best part because that shows that the story still goes on, even in biopics where the important politician is assassinated or the painter finally finishes their masterpiece and dies. Yeah, but that's not the end. Even if the person who's the subject of the documentary passes away, that's still not the end of the story. So I'm
Mhm.
glad to show that there's more to it. And that was really heartwarming to see that, what, for example, Rhett left behind still keeps on going. And what Ryan had made in a creative community helped us all to this day. Part of my profession right now is creating films at my employer. So part of what Ryan helped me nurture when I was a teenager is what I still am using now to get paid for to take care of my children in my home, so that
Mhm.
really means a lot. So I guess that's part of the catharsis. Yeah.
Yeah, and that passion never really leaves you. I mean, it's kind of put on hold for a while, but clearly
Yeah.
it never left you guys, and we're
Yeah.
all very grateful for this. Let's get to technical stuff. I'm very curious from an artistic standpoint and tech stuff. How long did this documentary actually take to film and get content over a period of what time are we talking here?
I was gifted, as I was saying, from James and Ryan and all the musicians, this huge body of work. So I had to sift through that. I hired an editor. Her name is Sean Walmsley. She's British, and she's a friend of a friend. She had worked on my pilot project, XJW Coming Out of the Jehovah's Witness Religion, was the original super long title, XJW Coming Out project, which is a series on YouTube under the YouTube channel is now Witness Underground. All that content is there. So she edited that. So I asked her how she'd feel about this. She gave me a big contract with like different phases, and I paid her as we went. I never looked on the internet about former Jehovah's Witnesses in my whole life, even like 10 years after leaving the religion. I worked myself out of it. I unindoctrinated myself through science mostly. I was trying to find evidence for what I believed, and there was nothing. I interviewed Ryan. So that was one day. The very first time when you were seeing Ryan on screen, that is the exact moment where we're meeting each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never talked to. I've written to him, but then he came, and then we like had a conversation for the first time. So that interview happened in something like March when I was doing the crowdfund, or like 1 month before it. I was preparing for the crowdfund because crowdfund takes like 3 months of your life every day full time. So there was that. We got the money, and I was like, okay, like I have a lot of ideas. It was very like gray what I was going to shoot. I had talked to a lot of people, interviewing them, and I was going to go to this country and that country and go to get this person. And I was meeting all these XJW activists. So I had like a lot of those people were on the list of people I was interested in interviewing. But some part of me, like my core, knew from my experience in filmmaking that I should work first with people that I trust and that trust me already because we have a relationship. So I actually knew the other three members, Eric and Cindy Elvendahl and Chad Rieger personally, and we had kept a friendship after leaving the religion because we knew each other in the religion. And I had listened to their music in the religion, and I followed them after, and we've been doing some creative work remotely when I was in Vietnam. So I like really trusted them, and they trusted me, and they'd already given me their soundtrack. Music to soundtrack all my content for XJW Coming Out. So the whole first season is their music, and you hear some of the same music in this documentary. So my very first idea was to go to Minneapolis to work with them And I had, through the crowdfund, met James remotely. We hadn't met, but he was like, yeah, I'm interested. And like, here's 11, here's the money from the book sales. Thank you for helping me sell books and promote that. And I met, Ryan, and so I did the rest of the interviews. So I interviewed James at his house in that week. I was there for like 8 days. Interviewed James, Eric, and Cindy and Chad all in a week. And then my big thing that's like my art and then in that same week, we filmed music. And none of these people had played in like a decade or something. It was like 6 or 7 years for Eric and Cindy and Chad to play together. And then Ryan hadn't played with them in like 10 or 12 years or something. Wow. And the drummer had never heard any of these songs. And we're all in this like building together in James, and we all helped clean up this space to make this shoot for the day. And you see a lot of that in the film. Anyway, so that was like my creative way to like fuse it all together was to have all the past music, show off their music in a creative way in the film, but then like have these live music that like brings it to the present moment where they're all playing together and there's sort of a like, this is like a serious rock band, even though they're not even a band. They like 3 of the members were a band with a different drummer. Anyways, like a big mix, right? And it was also kind of special because in one of the songs in the middle of the film, Ryan's little sister, who's in the religion still, is in a band in the religion with Cindy, and they cover one of those songs. And so you see the transition from the archival footage of Cindy and Ryan's younger sister doing this duet and live, and then it transitions to Ryan playing his sister's part with Cindy, like playing that role, singing those lyrics. Vision for how to make this all work, and I was super excited. And I feel like there's like 30 reasons why it wasn't going to all come together, and there's always something that's getting in the way, and it was like so many reasons why it didn't work, and everyone brought the energy and like had the drive to like put this thing together because they believed in it. So anyway, 7 days, and then there was like an 8th day with Ryan's interview, if you count that, and then I went and shot a bunch more interviews. I thought this was going to be a much bigger thing, like 20 interviews. And apparently I've never paid attention to any documentaries I'd ever seen before, because like no documentary has that many people in it. It's really rare. So I saw these other interviews, and then I was so emotionally burned out that I was like, I need to go back to Denver and like work on the editing. And I was just like super exhausted. And there was this huge emotional weight that just like sat there. And I actually sat up for like 6 months. I really thought I was going to finish the documentary and like put it on YouTube in like 6 months or something, working on it casually. And then I hired this editor, and she sat with the footage for like 6 or 9 months. Like she worked on it over that time. And then she delivered to me a 2-hour cut from like 15 hours of stuff of just interviews. And she's like, okay, we need to cut another 30 minutes at least out of this to make it a film properly at the proper length, like an hour and a half. It's an hour and 80 minutes. And so we spent a year like sifting, cutting out pieces, moving little pieces around, cutting this 5-sentence thing down to the first and the second and a part of the 4th sentence, and like moving these pieces and getting a coherent dialogue and a coherent story that worked, like James mentioned, where people are kind of interspersing the same story between each other and telling a unique piece of it.
Love that part of it too.
Yeah, that's why I believe the art is in the flow. And I was learning. So she's the story editor. So she delivered me a story, and then I would edit it and give my feedback, and then she would cut it and change things. And that became a slog. It's still agonizing to think about. Like I would like, okay, we're done. And then like, 10, 15 more versions of like, okay, we're done. Oh my God. Okay.
We're not done.
Okay, are we done now? And like, now I'm just like, maybe it's not done. I don't know. No, but now it's done. I'm very happy with it.
Well, as you should be. It's amazing. And I think one of the biggest pressing questions is what's next? And what does life look like for you now? Both of you.
I would like to write another book So I wrote Deliverance at Hand. That's already 9, 10 years old now, but I would like to write another book. So I have gotten started on it, but I haven't progressed too far. Otherwise, life gets busy, so it's hard to always find time for your passions if that's not paying out. So do consider myself lucky that I get to do writing and filmmaking through my employer, and I just hope that keeps on increasing. And I also intend to stay in touch with everyone that you see on the film.
So all the artist music, most people ask that, like, how do I listen to their music? And there's a page on our website. The website is witnessunderground.com. And there's tabs at the top. So we have art, it shows all the music. We have a podcast, Witness Underground podcast. We have a series, XJW Coming Out. So the coming out stories that are more like your channel. And then there's a grant program. So 20% of all the money that comes through the program goes to other Jehovah's Witness artists who want to make something. And James and the rest of the people in the film will be asked as like a panel, here's the options. 4 people so far have applied. Right now it's $1,000. And then the second round is growing as people join the Patreon.
That is astonishing. That is the kind of activism I think we need, that kind of support. So it's not just going to stop with the documentary. So the project is growing. You have more people that want to know, is a network going to pick up this documentary? Is that possible?
Question. That's part of the reason, to answer one of your questions offline, which was, why have we been seeing this documentary trailer for years and we haven't been able to watch it?
And for our audience, I did ask that off camera. Like, I keep seeing this trailer.
So one of the reasons is that it's mostly landing on me, and I wanted to learn how to do distribution properly in the industry. So we went to 11 film festivals. We won an award at one of the film festivals. So the film was completed at the end of 2020 to a point that we were happy with, and is very, very similar to the final version. I made some very small changes. So in 2021, festivals started picking up the film, and so we took it on tour around the country to 11 festivals. And that was amazing. And the thinking was, and my understanding, because I took a course on how to do film festivals properly because I didn't know anything about it, I'm new in the space, that we would get approached for distribution, or that we'd meet people that do distribution, which means they would buy the rights to the film, they'll license the art, and then they would do the promotion to sell the film and get it on streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, etc. And what I've learned is that the whole industry is in a tumultuous time because, well, a lot of reasons. And one of them is the advent of ad-based streaming services. So now, just like the old days in the 90s, you have advertisements in the middle of your film. That's becoming big because people can't afford Netflix anymore because the prices are going up, etc. So they're watching films for free. And then revenue can come to the filmmaker. So distribution companies are getting in the way. They're still in the way, and they're gatekeepers, and they take up all your profits. And they used to pay filmmakers for their films, and now they charge like $30,000 up front before the filmmaker sees any money to get in, to pay to play. And then every filmmaker I've ever talked to so far, I've written a lot of directors, they've written me back or called me, and they're like, it doesn't work. This is the new path. And the new path is what we're pursuing. So it took me like a year and a half to figure this out, which is, that's like the big delay, is that I'm trying to figure out how to distribute properly. And I've learned the path, and the path is what we're trying to do right now, which is a multi-phase release. So we're releasing on Patreon right now. If you want to watch it right now, you can on patreon.com/Witness Underground. And it's $10, but then there's a lot more other stuff there. My other film is on there. The podcast is on there, writing, blog, all kinds of stuff. And then we're also highlighting a lot of artists. So one of the big things that I'm trying to do with the podcast, I am doing with the podcast, is finding other Jehovah's Witness artists. One of them you featured on your show, Wesley David, for example. He's become a good friend of mine, and I've helped him make a music video. And like he's got like a 90s like pop rock, indie rocker, and he's great. And he's got a great new album out. He's a really funny guy.
Oh, yay.
So people like him, or I did a great, one of my favorite episodes I've done so far is the Bloody Tuesdays, was one of my favorite episodes ever. And they're another band, also friends with Wesley David out in LA. And they've done some collabs live, and his music is amazing. He has 3 albums out that are really on the topic of leaving the faith and his deconversion. And it's like so wild. And he like samples the governing body, and he samples the Kingdom songs, and he like makes funny, goofy lyric changes. It's so good. It's like pure psych rock, and it's really bizarre stuff. I love it. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing I love to do and I want to do more of. And I've been reading through this project so far, just like getting the word out, getting the trailer out. People are like, oh, we're witnesses in a metalcore band from Australia. We're ex-witnesses. So like 3 of us are ex-witnesses in the band. You got to check our stuff out. And they're awesome. So that kind of thing is what I'm spending my time on. But right now, phase 1 is Patreon. And phase 2, I'll probably put it on Vimeo for direct pay to play, which is ad-free option. And then the phase 3, which is the big release, is going to be on Tubi. And I mean, I can't guarantee that it'll be on Tubi, but there are other options too. So if Tubi doesn't work out, but Tubi actually has a financially viable path where the ad revenue from the ads, a big chunk of it goes to the filmmaker, which we crowdfunded the film, we crowdfunded the production of the film. And I use that money economically to then hire an editor and work with that smaller budget. And then I spent the rest of the last few years funding it myself in the whole. Wow. And it's like 4x what we got on the crowdfund in terms of what it actually cost. So
what about something like Vice? Does Vice?
That's a great question. I actually wrote to the director of the excellent documentary called Crusaders. I just did a film review on that on my blog. And I'm so proud of that film. And so I reached out to him through Mark, John Redman, Mark O'Donnell. Thank you. Thank you. Mark and I have been talking for like since I started researching XJW's Witnesses. I feel like I'm like a cultural anthropologist with this project. So like I didn't know anything about XJW's Witnesses on the internet. And I did. And I was like, oh my God, there's like millions of people like me out here. I had never thought about researching.
Mark is a good resource. I love him so much. Yeah.
Same. So him in that film like was a big highlight. And then he put me in touch with the director of that film because they got their film on Vice Versa on the Vice channel. And I thought, wow, that's an amazing avenue. And he's a big time director and he would care about the film. So I haven't heard back from him, which is fine. He had a whole life. But I think that everything I have pursued has led when it comes to like playing the game with the industry hasn't really worked. And even having an award and going to the film festival, we didn't get in any like major film festival. We got into like 6 really noteworthy festivals and then like 7 or 5 more that were pretty small. And any exposure is good. Each of those kind of gave a little spike in viewership and like awareness. But now it's time to like show everyone in the world. So that's the phase. Patreon, Vimeo, on demand, and then Tubi, and probably a handful of others over time. But I will obviously announce those as they come out. It's a whole game to play, and almost everyone you talk to wants their fingers in the pie, and they want to take 10% of everything without any risk. So they want me to pay them for them to send my trailer to somebody, and I'm like, seriously, you want thousands of dollars to send a link to somebody?
Wow. So
it's really parasitic, and it's been a big learning curve. But I have arrived at a place where I found an independent release path. But thank you for asking, because it's like no one understands. Everyone's like, I'm so frustrated. Why can't I watch your film? I'm like, I want you to watch it. I really want everyone to watch it. We all do.
Right. Well, you know what? And now we're grateful that we can watch it, and it is absolutely worth it to go to your website and watch it.
I just monologued for a while, James.
You did. Oh my! I'm waking back up again. You know what? To continue with the theme of that, the story doesn't end when the lights come back on in the theater. Growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, you're always taught that there's just a little bit of time until everything's going to change, right? I was told you're not going to have to worry about getting a job because the paradise will be here by then, or you'll never graduate from high school, you'll never have to worry about getting a driver's license, don't date because you're never going to be old enough to get married, you will certainly never have children, and all those things happened to me while still a witness. And I started looking back, like I was told I was never going to graduate, and now I've graduated 5 years ago, and now I have a child that's aging. And so it's just always, at least for me, and I think for a lot, and this probably explains why a lot of witnesses have a difficult time later on, is because it's hard to think past that immediate horizon. What are my plans for this summer? That's easy. But what are my plans for 15 years from now? That's a little bit tougher, and witnesses thinking that the end is coming, they don't put their money in stock or 401k. They don't go to college because why waste 4 or 6 years doing that when you're not going to reap the financial benefit of getting a reward or even get a rewarding job, never mind if it's even financially beneficial. So I like this film. Participating in the creation of it helped me to see that there is a continuance of life and the story, and that you have to like plan ahead, and that there's more happens, even if your best friend passes away young, or even if all of your even if your parents, grandparents, and uncles and aunts all shun you because you've left the religion, and even if you didn't plan, corporate wise, employer wise, to be well off financially or educationally, you can still enjoy life, what we have here, what we know is real. So I thank Scott for that, and I think that has helped me, and I think that it would help viewers too, to see that there's more to life than just the next 12 months. So stay here because people care about you, and stay alive because there's more to it.
I absolutely love that message. That is one of my concluding questions as well. Before I get to that, I do want to say that is a really big part of deconstruction that I know a lot of people may, in fact, miss. It's one thing to dismantle the doctrine. It's another thing to remove yourself emotionally. But the overall message is, I left, now what? And so many people, they get stuck in this, when as Jehovah's Witnesses, we're stuck in this eventual happiness, right? We're stuck in this, just kind of, this life right now is just a means to an end. And there's this measure of guilt and this feeling of selfishness that you have to unravel and untangle when you do even the smallest things to better yourself, whether it's education, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's anything like that. And that was one of the biggest challenges for me and a lot of other people I talk to. Men especially struggle with coming out of that organization, because anything that the men were good at doesn't matter in the real world. Maybe they were an elder or a really good public speaker. And sometimes it's really hard to learn that, you could still have those skills and parlay them and use them elsewhere. And so there's this disorienting feeling of, what do I do now? Because it became your identity, and finding a new identity. Some of the buzzwords like new personality still creep up. But finding a new identity and finding your place is really difficult, when many people that I've spoken to, especially on this channel, struggle with, but that was all I was good at. And now what do I do? It's like being dropped off on an airplane by airplane on this deserted island, and you have to kind of find your way around without a compass. It's really difficult.
When I first left, one of my uncles wrote to me and said that I was really making a bad choice leaving, because the end is coming soon. He said, I'd imagine it's going to come 2 to 3 years from now. And by this time I'm 30 years old, and I'm thinking, no, you've been saying that since I was, since I first met you when I was an infant, and so I actually printed that out and like stuck it on my wall, because I thought, I'm going to write to him 3 years from now and say, how far away is it now? But at the time, looking at that statement that was taped up in my wall for years, it was so hard for me to even think about 3 years from now. It's like, oh my God, my 1-year-old will be 4, and what am I going to be doing for a job? And am I going to be, I'm going to be that much closer to retirement? It was so hard. And I feel like, and I don't feel like, I know that a high percentage of witnesses and ex-witnesses just completely exit because they can't even imagine what the next years will be, or the next decade will be like. So that's kind of been a struggle for me too. So I'm glad that there's things like this with Scott, and that there's the creative outlet to see that there is something 2 to 3 years past that, despite what my uncle says.
Yeah. And it's not all terrible.
No.
This world. Yes, it's bad, but also being in the organization, nothing is all good or all bad. Maybe we had terrible abuse happen to us, and many of us were all actually survivors of narcissistic abuse, having been in that religion. But nothing is all good or all bad. And once you kind of I look at the organization as an abusive relationship. It doesn't define me, but it doesn't identify me anymore. And one of the things that I love about your message, both of you, and, to all the storytellers that were a part of this documentary as well, is that we all fully admit that, yes, this was our struggle, but here we are now. And if I can get through it, if I can get to this point artistically, financially, mentally, and emotionally, then you can do it too. And I really feel that is one of the takeaways from this, is that it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, how long you were in it, whether you were baptized or not, what position you reached, it's still possible to heal from this. And in this case, they did it through art and through music. And, if this is a question to both of you, if you can talk to yourself, because they're in that audience, if you can speak to the younger versions of yourself who were in that organization pre-documentary, what would you say to them? And Scott, we'll go to you first.
I would probably keep it a secret that it would take me 5 years to get the film out, because I might not have started. I really thought I could do it in 1 year. I think I would say it's the right path, because it's been like a big healing journey. I don't recommend using filmmaking as therapy, but it had some of those elements for sure. Like, I was facing these heavy topics that I haven't really discussed with anybody. And I had not really ever done used any therapy or mental health services until I was in the middle of this thing, when I was being like re-triggering myself every time I sat down to edit.
I'm sure.
And like experienced like an anxiety attack doing public speaking on the topic of Jehovah's Witnesses. And like, that's the only time I've ever done public speaking in my life was on this topic. And I hated it as a witness. So like doing that again, I was like, oh man, I could have chosen any other topic to make a film on, but here I am. I have to like figure out how to do this. And so I think like there's a lot of growth that's come from it. So I would like encourage myself to do it.
That's interesting. You mentioned
feel
about re-traumatizing yourself, to go, both of you, to go through all of this and to kind of relive it. That must have been quite an experience.
I would tell myself to not be so nervous, because I'm on the right track. When I was researching things and finding holes in the Watchtower's edifice, that calm down, it's okay. This is right. Keep doing this. Keep searching for the truth wherever it might lead. And not be so nervous about things. Oh, you didn't go to the meeting today? Chill out. It's okay. The movie you just watched, rated R in America? Chill out. It's okay. You know, you've been sick for a week and you haven't shaved? It's okay. Chill out. It's okay that you have a little beard. It's okay. So all the silly little things that we had to worry about back then, I would like to go back and tell myself to chill out a little bit and enjoy life.
Thank you, because these are universal concerns. And because when you're in that organization, you don't speak frankly about them. You're not allowed to be negative, like you mentioned at the outset. You're not able to talk about these things. So you push them down, you push your intuition down, and you think you're the only one, you know, but through mediums like this and through your documentary, I really think we're really helping so many people, especially you guys with this. And I'm just so grateful that you came here and your message is getting out there.
What is the life after? For me, has always been way more interesting than what was life like for you inside. Right. Like, well, we all know what that was like. And it's not good for all kinds of reasons. Long laundry list. But yeah, I think it's really valuable to have more channels that are doing what you're doing.
So you're saying you don't like my podcast? Oh my God, how bad was Revelation? Its Grand Climax at Handbook. You don't like that one? I'm thinking of starting it up.
So it's interesting too, because the first question when I woke up that I asked myself was, now what? And I couldn't find anything on YouTube that answered the now what. And I actually I needed therapy intensely, because I was having full-on panic attacks. And you know, I am a big proponent of it for those who do have the resources to get that. But I couldn't find anyone talking about the now what of, okay, yeah, I even encourage people. I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but when I lose subscribers or if I lose followers, I don't go by that. Like, I don't care. But if I do, my immediate thought is, they must not need this content anymore. And I'm happy to hear that, because sometimes we get caught in this loop of, you know, consuming so much XJW content. And when you mentioned re-traumatizing yourself, that can happen all the time. The Reddit group and just keeping an eye on it can actually be very damaging.
Yeah, I think so. And it kind of shocked me, of all the channels that are out there, there's a few noteworthy ones that really do like watch their content and explore it and dive into like the nuance of like the way they wrote a sentence this year versus a different year. And it's like, stop reading the Watchtower. That's step one. Why would you spend more time with your life on that? I have no energy for that garbage. It's literally like fire starter, you know?
Right. And there's good books out there, like literal books, if you just want to read something good. Yeah.
Things that actually qualify as literature.
Right. Exactly. Remember we were told though, oh no, being a JW, and I'm sure you went through this with being a Bethelite, James, is that like, it's better than a college education.
Oh yeah, they would say that. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
the only
false
thing better
advertising.
about it than college was that it was less expensive.
Right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, for them and for us, exactly.
Right,
So it was
yeah.
a lot of free labor.
Yeah,
You guys.
that's true. Yeah.
This is the big moment. We only have 3 to 6 months for a film to have its life out in the world. And so the more of this, it means a lot to me to be on your channel. I'm trying to do as much of this as possible. But
Well,
thank
we're
you
going
for
to
having
link
us.
we're going to link your channel and your podcast in the subscription box. If you haven't seen this yet, it's worth it. Watch this documentary, go to the podcast, go to his channel. And, honestly, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm really excited for you guys, for the community, because this is kind of the refreshment that we needed. I think we needed someone who can say, listen, your talent through art. We are really, really thankful for that. You guys, thank you so much for being on, and we will definitely see you next time.
Awesome.
See you next time, Wendy. I really appreciate it.
In our stories, we find each other, and in each other, we find ourselves. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.